This week, we welcome back Jeremy Winter. He's the director of Azure Management at Microsoft. He's been on other shows, but he's going to come on Business Security Weekly this week to talk about what CISOs and CISOs need to know about Azure. In the Leadership and Communications segment, the trust crisis in business employee engagement and successful change, and 3 shocking ways to show up today. Is that right, Jason?
That is absolutely right.
Okay, good. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. How do you stay ahead of attackers while trying to maintain the strength of your current security posture? At TrustedSec, they believe research goes hand in hand with security consulting. In addition to their established security offerings, they continually advance their own expertise with a dedicated, experienced research team led by Carlos Perez that works on short and long-term projects to assist their consultants during engagements, developing proprietary attack vectors and investigating new threats. Go to trustedsec.com/securityweekly to learn more about the pioneering research team at TrustedSec. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow. Welcome, everyone, to Business Security Weekly. This is episode 132, recorded on June 17th, 2019. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. My other host for this show is Jason Albuquerque. He's the CISO over at Carousel Industries. Jason, welcome.
Hello there. How are you, Paul? Hope you had a great Father's Day weekend.
I did. It's a lot of monumental things. Father's Day and my wedding anniversary.
Awesome.
So.
Very good.
Yes.
Very
13.
Good. 13. I'm hitting 10 this year.
Apparently, that's the magic number.
Is it?
I guess the divorce rate goes down after 13
So
years.
I still got I thought 10 was the
and I
one,
made it.
I guess
yeah.
I
don't know about the murder rate, though. I don't know the rate at which your spouse murders you, because I'm pretty sure that's inevitable.
I think that started with me at about 7.
Yeah. Oh, boy. We are returning to Las Vegas. Speaking of wives being pissed, we're going to Las Vegas for Black Hat and DEF CON. If you would like to request a briefing or sponsored interview, we're actually opening up some more slots. We're pretty much sold out.
That is outstanding.
Of the slots that we had projected. And so rather than doing some free briefings, which we haven't had much interest in yet, we said, well, since we have the suite, we're opening up more paid interviews, which is what we're going to be doing. If you're interested in those, you can go to securityweekly.com/booking if you would like to sit with us at Black Hat and record basically why your company's awesome and what they do and why you're better than everyone else.
I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to be there with you guys.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you're overwhelmed by the amount of content that we distribute, as many of you have told us, you can go to securityweekly.com/subscribe, get on that interest list. We are furiously working on software to support that, and it's very much taking shape, actually. I had to step back and write a lot of code to get the app where it needs to be. And one of the features that's in the release that's forthcoming will be to support standard categories and tags, which will feed into the subscription website. And really what that means for our listeners is you'll be able to register for a site, tell us you're interested in these specific things. When we publish that content, it'll go out to you.
Continuously improving that experience. I love it.
It's a lot of fun. Let's see. Jeremy Winter is here with us. He's the director of Azure Management at Microsoft, responsible for Azure governance, policy configuration, PowerShell, disaster recovery, and more. Jeremy, welcome to the program.
Hey, man, it's great to be back. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. It is nice to have you on the show. I love the way Azure's been progressing feature-wise. I think there's a lot of companies adopting the technology, and it keeps growing. So props to you and your team.
Thanks.
You're still smiling, which is good. That's a good sign.
I got some bags under my eyes, but we're still smiling.
That's awesome.
I haven't shaved for a while, but it's just how it works.
I've been there. I shaved this morning really for just the show. Actually, I was pretty scruffy from a lot of. I was coding a lot this weekend.
Were you?
Waking up early
Happy
in the
Father's
morning.
Day.
Yeah, right? I was.
Yeah, I was going to say. Coding, Father's Day, that works out real well.
I saw some tweets about some really good scotch, though, so hey.
Yeah. The morning was coding while everyone was sleeping. And then, we shared some scotch yesterday. It was
Beautiful.
Yeah, good.
For a lot of C-level executives out there, I really think a lot of things that go through my mind are when you're planning this type of migration, let's say you want to take your on-premises technology and push it to the cloud. I think a lot of it is what I deal with the software, right, is requirements, right? What are the requirements? What are we going to need to be able to provide functionality? What do we need to be able to provide accurate testing for things like security, for things like configuration, for roles? And so a lot of those questions enter my mind. But Jeremy, I'm sure you work with a lot of C-level executives that have general concerns. But I mean, what are some of the more popular ones, and set the stage for moving into the Azure Cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit it on the term migration when you start to think about that. This is where I spend a lot of time in discussions with that C-level about how to, I'd just say, take a step back from migrating the cloud and just how to set yourself up as you head that direction.
Right.
Too often we're in a bit of a hurry, I think, to just get to the cloud as quickly as we can. Some of our dev teams are already there, and then you're in a situation of, what do I do now? And so when we sit down and talk with migration, I mean, I think that first step is just get the right people together, sometimes even the right partner in there with you, depending on where you are with partners to help you get to the cloud. And really just think about that center of excellence that you need, that brings, in my mind, brings not just the developer, but brings the IT team together, the security team together, and really starts to think through that end to end on how you want to move forward.
Yeah, and Jeremy, I would say from a stakeholder perspective, I think it's important to bring other business units in as well, right? Depending on what applications you're going to be supporting up in the cloud. I mean, you may be in an instance where you're bringing in your CFO to talk about strategy and things of that nature.
I agree. When you think about it, this is where we talk about it. This is that center or cloud center of excellence. You've really got to bring that team crew together and really make I'd say some hard decisions and hard calls, but also bring in those other groups like you just mentioned. I think the finance is one that's really important when we want to think about costs. Those business and dev teams are also important about which clouds and how they're thinking about the cloud and how they want to develop against the cloud. But also when you think about it, I see just audit and compliance. Yeah. You may be moving components that the dev or the engineering teams want to move quick on, but you want to make sure you can have your auditability on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I know for a lot of our clients, I mean, Carousel has about 6,000 clients that we support, and some of them have specific needs, like domestic needs, right? They're a DoD organization, or they deal in law enforcement or something of that nature, and they have specific needs, right? So they need to know that their data is being hosted domestic only, right? So how do you alleviate some of those concerns and pains,
absolutely,
right?
And we've seen that. I think the key I would bring up is just think holistically. And if you're from the security side of the house listening to this or watching, and you're not involved in that overall strategy and move to the cloud, you need to get there. You need to be able to get yourself at the table. Or if you're at the executive level, you need to make sure security is involved in that front, because you want to think holistically. And I've seen companies that have started to go down this path and slow and stall a bit. I think we look at Chevron as a customer I work with, and man, once Chevron really put this group together and started to look holistically across what do we need to do across all these different departments, whether it's on IoT and edge, lift and shift, or which components we want to modernize, and start to think about their overall business end to end, that's when things really started, in my mind, started to click and move in a pretty productive way. And I don't mean just in speed to the cloud, but how they think about their organization.
It's interesting. When I think about how important it is to add the right resources, is you could have a project like this one and add a lot of resources. Jim, you mentioned partners and such, right? If you don't have the right ones there, your project's likely going to fail. Even though you might have a deep bench of consultants you can call upon to do stuff, they're not going to have the right direction unless the right people are at the table from the beginning.
Yeah, I totally agree. On the migration front, a lot of my teams build the migration tools. We help get out and do migrations, and we also help our partners. But we've seen you get the wrong people, wrong partner that aren't thinking holistically, and it can really slow some of that progress down, and or cause you a lot of rework when you have to sit down and kind of think about what you need to do. Yeah,
and I find that too when I'm designing applications or migrations. I sometimes get stuck on like, how far ahead am I thinking? Like, how far can I actually think ahead and plan for those things? And then I think the other factor is, well, from the business leadership perspective, how important are those things, right? Like, how important is it that my database is in the cloud and maybe there's local copies for developers? How important is it that all my containers are in there and is it service? Like, where does that fall on the priority list?
Yeah. And that's why you want that conversation at the beginning, Paul. And, the last time I was on the call, I think it was right after, in the fall with Ignite, and we had talked about some of the security and policy and governance announcements that we had done this fall to really help this. But, your point on how you think about security or governance all up from a security perspective is really, really important. You talked about databases, but heck, we need to even take a step back and even talk about how we want the subscription to be set up.
Sure.
Who has access to the subscription? How do we think about our identity and the overall, what do we do with the identity that whether it's Active Directory, how do we handle identity? How do we handle RBAC? What do we think about management groups and the structure that can be done? These are some of the basic things that we've been able to rely on in the corporate, in our on-premises environment, because we've had these environments set up for so long. And you want to make sure you're spending that time going back and thinking about that at the beginning.
It's interesting, Jeremy. I've been spending a lot of time on this topic lately, and what I've realized is that in this particular scenario, when you've got an on-premise Active Directory installation, oftentimes policy decisions are made by sysadmins or IT security people, right? They say, we have a security policy, but it's really been implemented over the years about who is going to complain the loudest or who's going to complain the least, right? Those who complain the loudest, we're like, okay, you have to give those people access because they'll just complain really loudly, right? And that's defining your policy. And that I realized that over the course of my career that's happened, and really there's lots of ways to fix that. One is to all come to the table and develop an actual policy. And I'm sure you run into this, both of you, when you do migrations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the old parochial method, right? It's kind of that reactive stance where I think, launching into something of this magnitude for an organization, you have no choice but to align with the business, right? It's where CISOs need to be. They need to be sitting at the table with the rest of the business units, designing this corporate strategy across every business unit within the organization, and not fall victim to those parochial, old school tasks that we used to do, right? It's now becoming a more strategic arm, right? Because this is a very strategic move, no matter what way you look at it, right? So, there's obviously a lot of myths. You talked about the subscription model, right? It's one of those scenarios where if my organization cross-charges other business units, how are we going to take that subscription model, blow that out into a cross-charge model? That's where our CFO has to get involved, right? That's where, so we have to be thinking strategically if we're going to go to this consumption-based model.
Yeah, Jason, totally. And I think also, we'll look at it, we talked about subscriptions and identity and how we want to set up the role-based access and the management group kind of hierarchy there. But then don't forget about also just the notions of how do we want to do encryption? What management or what monitoring, how do we want to collect the logs and reporting? How do we think about resource consistency? So if something's deployed out in the environment, I ensure that those things are consistent with those policies. you may even want to get into how you design the network from a software design, kind of an SDN approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the elements where, like when you get to the SDN, now you're working with the development teams closer. But these are the elements that I think you want to be able to bring to the table as a security professional as you're thinking about moving to the cloud. And you want to do it up front. You want to start to think about that. And all the cloud providers, including Azure, we have guidance on how to go do these, but I think it's pretty important for how you think about this up front.
Yeah, and it's in a sense, it's almost an opportunity for security to get involved and fix some of those things, because I know that there's C-levels all the way down to practitioners sitting going, yeah, I know that this is way too open in my environment, right?
Yeah.
And when we move to the cloud, this is the opportunity to take in those business requirements and say, let's really restrict things, people, places, thing, like nouns, essentially, right, about who can talk to what, right? And that, I think, is really, when I talk to my pen tester friends, right, and we look at malware that runs around, a lot of what they're taking advantage of is not even necessarily vulnerabilities and exploits. They're taking advantage of the trusts between identities of users and identities of applications. And if you can lock that down, I truly believe, everything I've been talking with different people from different vendors and defenders about how this is done essentially in different aspects, I think you really increase security across the board if you can do this in its truest sense.
It really does. I mean, it gives you an opportunity. There's enough disruption in this type of a project that gives you the opportunity to kind of reinvent what you did in the past, right? And all those bad practices over time that you built with an Active Directory or the way you manage your data center.
Firewalls are a different thing now, right?
Now you can kind of take another stab at it, right? And build it the right way.
Yep. Agreed.
So the other, we're chatting about like find the right first step. I'd say just get the right people together. That center of excellence, cloud center of excellence. Then from a security perspective, the other big thing I see is, as we just mentioned, really thinking about it is what do you want to do from all those core components I just listed. And that really helps you start to think about what am I going to do from the subscription all the way down to how I want to configure the network. And then what are the things I want to stay compliant with. And then you got to look from the technology perspective on what you can do. And I've watched teams even start to say, look, I want to get out of patch management. I'm going to essentially organize that so that I can understand the state of my patches, or I can understand the state of the configuration that I want to look for, or how my networks are configured. But then I'm going to delegate that down to the organization, so they out throughout the organization, so that they have to manage it as a much more in a self-service way to take a bit of pressure off the security teams. And that's what we've done here at Microsoft. The teams that are running Azure, our own MSIT, and I see some of these other customers that are doing it, Allscripts, JB Hunt, again, Chevron. These are all customers that have really started to move to that kind of centralized world of understanding the state of the environment. Then how do they get that speed and agility through delegation or self-organizational managed, and really starting to go push that DevOps approach.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm seeing, Jeremy, is enabling the business to move faster in all of the various, whether it's development, whether it's sysadmin, whatever it is, and delegating that down. But having security and administrators review some of the exceptions. But that starts with defining a policy, because if you don't have a policy, you don't know what's an exception to a policy. That's right. That's right. It's the cart before the horse kind of thing. And that's really where it's going. Now, my question, Jeremy, is how much of that functionality exists today in the Microsoft suite? Personally, I've seen a lot of third-party tools that can help with this situation. What exists in the Microsoft Azure components? Yeah,
so I think we covered a little bit of this before, but I'll make sure I get back kind of at it. At the core of the platform, when you think of Azure, we've added a ton natively into the platform. And of course, we want to be able to allow and enable you as customers to leverage the tool sets that that they're already using, so they can bring their tools with them. We've done things on the core platform. We've got over 3,500 cybersecurity professionals, and I get an opportunity to work with them both on the protecting our environment as well as actually building our software. Many of the teams in Israel And, we've added a lot of the core that you would expect: role-based access, multi-factor auth, PIM, identity protection. All these are the things that you'd expect in there. Key management, cert management. These are just your kind of core information protection that you need. And we have that at the core platform. But we've moved up 2 other layers. The next layer is really what I'd kind of think about it as my defense mode, my DDoS protection, anti-wall, IoT security, things like SQL threat protection. Those are all elements that we've really all added, and we've got native into the system. One cool one that we just released, I think in February and March, was we call it Project Sentinel. It's a security event and information management system completely hosted in the cloud. You can just pull all of your information, both from on-premises and into and your cloud resources, into this service. And that really brings you this new, leverage the power of our cloud, our artificial intelligence, and our analytics backends. So you can really start to go see all that data as you move to the cloud. So just a ton that we've done at the core of the platform. Now, I know it's an area we just have, I think, a ton in. One of the core pieces then we added on top of that, now you're moving from the security to more of the governance and compliance. Mm-hmm. This is where we have, inside Azure, we've taken the time to create we have it the control plane, Azure Resource Manager. It's a control plane that all CRUD operations go through across. If you want to do a create, you want to do a read, you want to deploy, it goes through this new control plane. We've built natively into that control plane the ability to do policy enforcement. So you can create policies yourself if you want to be able to set policies on our example. You can only create machines in certain environments. You can only have certain machines configured in certain ways. It's really native across all resources in Azure. And what's really cool about it is we also not only just at a resource level, but within the config level of a guest, you can go into the specific guest if you're doing VMs or containers, and you can also do it down inside the guest specifically. And so we've seen an immense amount of usage on this. Our top 300 customers on Azure are 100% of them are using it now. I challenged the team to hit the top 100. They did it in months. Now our top 300 are all using these core governance policy capabilities natively, and are asking us to expand that in even bigger ways, like with regulatory compliance.
And that's so big.
Long answer, Paul. Answer, Paul.
No, I love it.
We did a ton on this.
It's so big because any pushing of any kind of architecture or application into the cloud there's a lot of points of configuration. That's what I'm noticing. That it's not getting less, it's getting more.
Way more.
Like the more things you can push in the cloud, the more of those little configuration things. Some of them are how the application behaves, how the user interacts with it, how the user behaves. Some of it is an access control. Should I do this? Should I do that? We're just getting more of them, which is good. But managing all of those and having a central control plane like you described, Jeremy, is super important because you, again, want to enable the business to push it out, but you want to put some controls around what goes out so you don't have gigantic exposures that live in your network for like years and then you're stuck, right? And this is, I think, really the opportunity to get around that.
And to Jeremy's point, I think having visibility into your regulatory posture is huge, right?
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're adherent or compliant with whatever regulations you have to abide by. So having that visibility right at your fingertips is very important to someone like myself as a CISO who needs to get with the organization and say, by the way, it's not so scary going to the cloud. It's not so scary going to Azure, right? And here's why, because they meet all of these different controls that my CFO expects or our clients expect from us, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think doing the work in the control plane it's a bit of a dream for us, because if you think about our on-premises environments in the past that we're all been a part of, you don't have that control plane. Mm-hmm. It's across to any action that goes across those environments is pretty federated. And so we're trying to collect data across everything and then make reactive decisions from that. But here, as you move to the cloud, you this control plane, and it's why we did the heavy lifting to put everything native in that one control plane, whether I'm using the portal, whether the resource is a container, a network, a storage, a core VM, whether it's a serverless component, it is native there, and it's we're able to now quickly query that. You can, from a security perspective, I can query it and see what's going on in a kind of a virtual CMDB. I can pull all the data and enforce that everything has the right logs enabled, so that if something is deployed in the environment, bam, the logs are being written to my security event system, and or at least the logs are being collected and stored. And I have an audit or activity log that's showing what's happened across the environment. Who did it? When did it change? And I just didn't have this before in any of our other environments. We really had a kind of a bolt-ons off to the side. So it's interesting, just from a geek like me that loves to be able to put that control, loves to be able to build these technologies to be able to really have that control plane. It's been fun to go try to build.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, from someone like in my role, right, from my perspective, now I want to sit back and say, all right, debunk some of the myths, right? Some of the myths that are out there is that, Azure, number one, isn't very friendly with open source tools and things of that nature, open source APIs, things of that nature. Because now you're saying you have this virtual CMDB up in Azure that I can take advantage of and integrate with my CMDB potentially. Now I get even greater visibility across all of my assets and resources in my environment. For me, that's a beautiful thing. So debunk that myth. I mean, how open is Microsoft to open source integrations, open source tools, APIs? How can we take advantage of that and now get a holistic view across the organization?
I mean, that is totally a myth. And, I look at it and say, we're not the old Microsoft you remember. All of our components, even you take my PowerShell crew, that drives PowerShell. We open sourced PowerShell, and and it's not just open source and then leave it to the community. We do about a 50-50 contribution back with the community on.
Nice.
Anytime we think about the work we're doing with our Azure Kubernetes service, or even the elements we just did with Git, everything we think about is open source at this point. The control plane, just to give you an example, Jason, that control plane, our own security teams use this to go query against, just like we would any of our customers. And so this Azure resource graph that's available, we put it in preview last fall. It's for you to go query against real time and go look at. And then you'll see here in the coming months, we're taking the actual ARM control plane and allowing you, we already have talked about this somewhat publicly, but we'll continue to go even do this more, where you as a provider, a third party, an ISV, or a customer building your own, hacking your own solutions together, you can you'll be able to extend the control plane yourself and take advantage of everything that I've built natively into the control plane. It's there for you. And we're really wanting to give you an even playing field, just like the rest of the community, to just be able to build and connect into the elements that we've created in the control plane, but then I'll let you extend it from there. And that's been just, the ISVs we've talked to, that's just been been thrilled to be able to leverage that. We see ServiceNow as an example, using it to go start to query against the environment so they can populate their CMDBs, and it's awesome. This is what we're intending to do, is just make it an open programmatic control plane for Azure.
That's awesome. I'm a ServiceNow client as well, so for me that's music to my ears.
Gotta have it, and they're great, and we want to make sure that when you look at the ServiceNow CMDB and the data they have in there, you want it up to date. And so with the cloud, it's been hard to be able to get that, and so we're partnering with them to be able to pull that information from us, and it's great tool.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the visibility, because right now we use it for our entire service delivery automation, including security operations and GRC. Yeah. So being able to have that visibility with an integration from Azure to our CMDB, which connects to our security operations suite and our GRC suite, now we have that, that great visibility across the organization. That's great to hear.
Yeah, Jason, this is where I think, we talked earlier about make sure you get the right people, get the right governance and security inside, thinking through the components you want to use, and then get moving in it with that way, using the tool or using all the constructs I just outlined that we had in Azure. I think, but just as you mentioned, it's a journey. It's a journey on the tools. It's a journey on the partners you're going to have, and you're just going to learn as we get through. You're going to learn your way through as you get into the cloud. And what we've seen even with some of our other our customers in there, as they get in, call it a year later, they start to evolve and change and see what's been super advantageous for them to be to the cloud and other areas that they need to change. And so you're just going to evolve your tool set, and you're going to evolve your workloads, and you're going to evolve your organization as you move to the cloud. But I think security plays a massive role in this, which is why we've spent so much time building it in the platform and then up in the governance and compliance side.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, very good. And just one tip here that I'd wonder if you could share. So obviously taking that approach that this is going to become a journey, right? Obviously you're going to be in the hybrid scenario for quite some time. What are some good approaches that CISOs like myself or CIOs can take once they're diving in? They say, all right, we got to be in this hybrid model. How do I get the right visibility across both ends of the spectrum, the cloud side, the on-prem side, and just so I know I'm moving strategically in the right direction while keeping, both sides of the aisle secure and compliant?
Yeah. So, man, this is one of those hurdles we're still jumping and looking at how we get through. My first suggestion or first thing I'm seeing that's really working well from the security side is, all right, you're sitting in the on-premises world. You've really made that commitment to move to the cloud in a big way, and you've done all the work we just talked about on the show so far. You've got your compliances and everything figured out of where you want to head. Now you set a baseline, and this is that kind of core. You know what's on, or you think you have a good idea of what the baseline is in the on-premises world or that environment that you're moving from. Mm-hmm. Set that baseline and make sure you use that as a set of key performance indicators of where you either want to improve or you want to at least match as you move to the cloud. That could be your identity, like I said, your logs, it could be your configuration compliance, you choose. And then as you move those first sets of workloads to the cloud from a security perspective, you want to make sure that you're able to match or beat what you've had inside the on-premises side. And that may also mean just visibility into all the logs, and make it as a part of your checkpoint or your journey as you go through and you start migrating to the cloud. You say you do the first 1,000 VMs or you move the first modern app over. Stop after that's done and just assess it back with your Center of Excellence crew about how that baseline is going. Are you getting the right security baselines? Do you have the right resource consistencies? Are your identities where you need to be? And in the modern world, did you get the right deployment acceleration that you're looking, but still stay within those safeguards? That's kind of my first piece is just, once you get all that set up, don't have to do it all at once, but set the key ones that matter for you and then get rolling. And usually that's a security baseline and an identity baseline.
Yep, and by taking that agile approach, you can continuously improve throughout the process, right?
That's right.
That's awesome.
Now, when you talk about the hybrid space, JC, you bring up that point on the hybrid space. That's one where now you're looking in these two systems, and this is why we've done the work with Azure Security Center, staying focused on the security view here for our call here. We've done the work inside Azure Security Center and that Project Sentinel I mentioned earlier, that these work in a hybrid way. And what we see customers doing is starting to, as they migrate to the cloud, they'll use that as that starting point for now. How do they get the visibility back to the other environments? That's why I see so much of my patch management system that sits inside Azure being leveraged back on site or a non-Azure environments. And we see the same thing with the security, that Project Sentinel is now we're using it to connect those core data that we wanted to have in the baseline, whether it's logs or security compliance or identities, and start to pull that information in and use that. So now I'm using Azure and those tools in Azure to be able to pull and see the state of my environment back on site. And it's been important for all of us here, whether it's my System Center suite, my Intune, the Intune work that's happening over on the client side, or any of the work we're doing with security and AD, is how do we do a co-manage and hybrid world together so that our stuff works? Because it will be a journey, and we know you'll be working in these multiple environments, and we're good with that. That's just part of our design.
That's great. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Jeremy, thank you so much for appearing on Business Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you as always.
It's great to meet you, Jeremy.
I just love having you having me on the call, and anytime I can talk security and management and migrations, that's right in one of the things I think about all day.
Oh, sweet. I think a lot of our audience is at ease now about moving to the cloud. Absolutely. Based on our conversation today.
Very good.
So, Jeremy, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
With that, we'll take a short break. Come back with the leadership articles for this week. Stay tuned.